Hey friends, welcome tonight to our fun chat about Queen Victoria and all things Victorian. I'm super excited to have several of my author friends, and we might have some other guests joining us later. But I thought it'd be fun just to kind of go around our little squares here and introduce ourselves and maybe just say whether we write in Victorian or kind of what has drawn us to Victorian era, and then we'll get into more details after that. So first of all, we are celebrating the release of my book on Queen Victoria and Princess Louise, which is called In the Shadow of a Queen. And it came out through Shadow Mountain Publishing last week. And we'll be doing some giveaways as well. In fact, I'll put a little special banner I created for a second. So you just comment on this post in a couple days. We'll just draw from the commentators and pick a couple winners for the hard copy of the book. And I guess I have to do this disclaimer that Facebook is not responsible for this giveaway. Anyway, so welcome everybody. I'm really excited to have you here, and we'll just start with Jennifer right out of the gate.
Do I start with me?
Yeah.
All right. Now I forgot the question. Where's the?
Just introduce yourself.
I do write in the Victorian era. I love the Victorian era.
Yeah.
And the reason I had kind of written a little bit in the Regency era before, and I like the Victorians so much better because the clothes are amazing. They're way awesomer than the Regency era. And then women just kind of have more opportunities to do things like have jobs or, be a nurse or do whatever, be a teacher than they had in the Regency. I love it. I love Queen Victoria, and I love all the weird rules they had, and they're kind of uptight about some things and really like crazy the opposite about other things. I think it's fascinating. Victorian era.
Awesome. Want to go ahead, Nancy?
Me? I echo everything Jen just said. For the same exact reasons, I love the Victorian era. And I love that the closer you get to the turn of the century, the more inventions there are, and the more, it was just such a time of discovery. And I think that's what I love so much about it, is because people were like, this is amazing, it's cutting edge. And before long, they were going 30 miles an hour in a car or on a train. And it was like, wow, And of course, it was a big deal. So yeah, I love it because it seems like people were so excited about some things. Other things, not so much. Like workhousing.
Yeah, there's some downers there. Go ahead, Julie Wright.
The Victorian era is just all the cool things. I write mostly like contemporary and then Regency, but I love Victorian era just because it's just like Nancy said, it's so much discovery and invention and it just how everything everybody was excited to learn something. It was like there was a race to discover more and to see who could. I just loved the idea of invention and definitely more opportunities for women. And they were growing in their ability to have a voice in that era that they didn't ever have before. Plus, we had some great writers come out of the Victorian era. And where would we be without Dracula? So I don't know. I love that era. It's just very cool.
Exactly. Okay, Julie Danes.
Well, I write mostly pre-Victorian era. And I honestly have some mixed feelings about the Victorians. They were very innovative, but they were also pretty destructive. They changed the face of the entire world. And I don't know what kind of world we would live in if they hadn't gone out a-conquering. And I'm not 100% sure it was all for the better. They could be pretty brutal. So, but it is a very, very fascinating era in the history of the world.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Rebecca.
So I tend to write more, again, like Julie, pre-Victorian, but I think I've done at least one novella in the Victorian era, and I love writing in Victorian, even though I don't do it often, because trains are so much easier than carriages when it comes to talking about our characters traveling anywhere. But I am also a massive fan of history and period dramas and everything. And I love Queen Victoria as just taking over as the monarch when nobody thought she could, and what she accomplished. And I kind of have a thing about the love story between her and Albert. And it's just fun. And the Victorian era is gorgeous. Just stunning, and it's just so much fun. I don't know why I don't write in it more. So hey, hashtag goals.
Right. Okay, Jen.
Is there anything left to say about the Victorian era?
Mention the food.
Oh, well, I don't really love the food in the Victorian era. So the food was fine, but I would never write about the food. No, I echo everything everyone said. I loved writing in our Orient Express series, even though it was like the last possible second of the Victorian era, right before Edward took over. But it was really fun to be able to put her on a train and just have her be able to go by herself, and nobody cared too much about it. I mean, a little bit, but like that kind of stuff is cool for the Victorian era. But I love Queen Victoria. I mean, kudos to a powerful woman who starts her whole reign when she's 18 years old, has all those kids, takes on all the men and all the parliament, gets her own ladies' maids when she wants them. Like, she was a tough, really admirable woman. And I know she had her issues, right, as we all do. But at the same time, I don't know that I could have done what she did. And for years and years, up until Elizabeth, she was the longest reigning monarch. I mean, talk about a woman who really had a voice in their day, which is so rare. So I really love her for that, just for being a woman and doing what she did with what she had. Yeah, and what everyone else said.
Yeah, awesome. So I did prepare some pictures, and so this will only take a couple minutes, but I feel like I want to show them all because they all brought back very fun memories of my research. And so these are all specific to Louise. So Louise, which is the main character of my new book, she was the fourth daughter and sixth child of Queen Victoria. So she was kind of a middle child. Her personality she was very passionate about things. She kind of drove her mom up the wall because she was very persistent when she wanted something. And so if you've even read the back cover of the book, you know that she was an artist. In fact, her whole family were artists, and her dad was, her mother was, but she really wanted to pursue it. She wanted to pursue sculpting, which is interesting because women sculptors back in especially the early Victorian era, they were only allowed to sculpt animals and women and small children. They were not, it was considered immodest and indecent for them to sculpt the man's body. She did end up going to a public art school after a lot of persuading. It didn't last very long. The queen was sure to make her very, very busy on days that there were class. There are only women in her class as well. So this actually, this is right in front of Kensington Palace in London, and this is kind of Louise's crowning achievement. She sculpted her mother, the queen, and this was something that she is very well known for. So just a couple other pictures. This is one of Louise's watercolors. So she was very talented watercolorist. And this is Louise as a young girl. She was said to be the most beautiful daughter of Queen Victoria, which sometimes can have pros and cons to it, which means sometimes she has more expectations than everybody else. I'm trying to find these pictures that really come in order. Okay, so this is a picture of her a little bit older. And then we have her, this is, spoiler alert, this is the man that she married. I won't name him, but anyway, so this is probably about half, several years into the marriage. But this is their wedding. I know this isn't a super clear picture, but it was actually in St. George's Chapel, which is on the Windsor grounds. And if you watch any part of the procession from Queen Elizabeth II's funeral, this is where they took her to do kind of a special family ceremony, and before they would actually bury her at Frogmore later. So one more picture is, this is her wedding cake. And it was 5 feet high. And just a little tiny thing in the story is this is when her sister Alice got married. And Alice got married about 6 or 7 months after Prince Albert died. And so they didn't do it in a chapel. They did it in the dining room. I think it was at Osborne. The reason I say Osborne is Balmoral Castle had like plaid argyle carpets. Anyway, but okay, I just have to say this because it's so interesting. So everybody was wearing mourning for years and years. And so Queen Victoria, she's sitting in the left corner. She has kind of a white thing over her hair. And she let her daughters wear these dresses for the ceremony immediately after they changed. Alice changed immediately after into a black dress, and that's what she went away on her honeymoon in. And then if you see on the huge portrait, that is the painting of Prince Albert and Queen Victoria when the children were young. And it is said that Queen Victoria just stared at the painting with tears in her eyes. She stared at her husband the whole time during the ceremony. And then this is Princess Louise as an older woman. The neat thing about her is she was really one of those people that was just always looking for the opportunity to do good and to support causes and to bring awareness, especially to women's health matters and children's public education. So that's kind of what she was known for over her lifetime. Anyway, so what I want to do is I want to just kind of go to each author again and talk about either some of the favorite things or some things you didn't really like about either Queen Victoria, the Victorian era. I gave them strict instructions, nothing gross, because there were a lot of disturbing and gross things that happened. So I do have the veto power of just muting someone. So it could happen. So we'll start with Jennifer Moore, and Jennifer knows exactly what I'm talking about and exactly what not to say. And you can post in the comments later if you want, but this will be a forever video.
Okay, something we like and something we don't like. Like I said, the dresses are amazing. I don't like, of course, I mean, I don't like it in any time period, but it's like, it was talked about a lot in the Victorian, about just the poor areas of London. Charles Dickens talks about it a lot, and people were super poor. And so while it's fun to like look at and like those dresses that Louise was wearing, they're gorgeous, but you know, most people are scraping by and, you know, eating yucky things and sick, and they, you know, their kids have rickets if their kids survive, you know, childbirth or anything. So it was kind of a cruddy time to be alive unless you were rich and white. So
yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I agree. And the thing that is interesting about that is that Princess Louise's her brother had hemophilia, and the whole country was in an uproar and they found out this very early on when he was born, soon after he was born, because he started getting bruises, and they're trying to track down like, where did this come from, and is Prince Albert really the father? And anyway, it's, you know how the gossip magazines happen over in Europe, but that just reminded me of that. Okay, Nancy, give us some dish.
I was going to say, it's because Prince Albert was her cousin.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
A lot of problems there. A lot of problems there with the inbreeding. But that's actually one of the things that I admire about her. And also one of the things I admire about Elizabeth I is that they were women in realms of men. And they were able to diplomatically kind of keep this at bay, keep that at bay, fix this, manipulate that. And I'm amazed at, she had all those kids and then all those grandkids, and she's like, and you will go to Germany and marry this royalty, and then you will go from there to Russia, and so she kind of kept her fingers in all these pies, which really is amazing. It was not a world that was friendly to men. I mean, we were clawing and scraping and having to just, you know, fight to get to where we're still kind of trying to get to. And she was able to do it, of course, because she was born into it, and so she was afforded that respect. But what she was able to accomplish, and again, Elizabeth I and even Elizabeth II, she was playing a diplomatic game for years, trying to keep everyone happy, and that's not an easy feat. So respect her, and also, yeah, the colonial thing wasn't great. Yeah, Julie, that's funny you said that. Like, yeah, colonialism. But yeah, so huge respect, and also, yeah, maybe we could have done that a little bit better. Or yeah, so
yeah, I definitely agree. Yeah. I just feel like even there's a lot. I mean, there's obviously going to be criticism any public figure, but especially of Queen Victoria when she was in mourning for so long, and you kind of understand why she was, but obviously, maybe she took it kind of to the extreme, but she didn't have. I really feel like she was dealing with some mental health struggles, and she didn't have resources or access or or medical understanding of what she was truly going through and how she could really start the healing process.
One more thought I had too when she was looking at that picture. Can I just add this really fast? She's looking at that picture throughout the whole wedding, that painting of her, and it's just, it's almost like you can see her like any one of us would look at an image and think that was the ideal. That was a moment, that was a snapshot in time when everything was perfect, and that's what you wish all of life could be like. And it was fleeting, and so.
Yeah, and anyway, she had actually wanted to cancel or postpone the wedding, but then Bertie, who's the oldest, he was King Edward eventually, he argued, well, this is what Papa wanted. This is what Prince Albert wanted. So we need to honor his wishes. And that's why the wedding proceeded eventually in the dining room. So, okay, Julie, what do you got for us?
I agree with everybody else. I love how much she loved her husband. I mean, that's just the fact that she loved him enough that she would want to be that. And again, like you said, mental health issues were a thing. We know she was dealing with postpartum as well. She had all of those kids, and postpartum can last for years if you're not taking the appropriate things to balance out those hormones. And women didn't know. And women's health, and that's barely a thing now. I mean, back then it wasn't even thought about. And she's dealing with running a country and, colonialism, which wasn't great. But she's trying to keep everything functioning. And kudos to her for that. And I think because of her strength, she gave women who were looking up at her the ability to think, yeah, a woman can do that. And I think he actually gave them the inspiration to say, yeah, I could do that. I maybe not rule a country per se because I'm not queen, but I could make decisions, and I have a voice and I have power. And I think that she actually inspired a lot of the women's rights movement. And things that weren't so great, though, I think she was a little hard on the kids sometimes. I think because she was running so much. She was in charge of so many different little things that I think sometimes she had to keep it strict. And I get that in some ways, but in other ways, it's like, wow, woman, you could have calmed down a little bit there and chilled out and a little bit. Like when Princess Louise decides she wants to go into sculpting. When my kids say, hey, they want to do something, I'm just all for it. I'm like, yes, absolutely. You should totally do whatever this thing you want to be. I don't know. That for me, that was one of those things that I couldn't really understand. But the part that I really despise about that era is that, like, the poverty, but specifically among the orphans of that era, there were like something like 30,000 children displaced and without parents or homes during that era. And I don't know. I'm really totally pulling that number out of the sky, but it was a lot. There was a lot of children with nothing. And so when you think about the old classic Charles Dickens with children pickpocketing and living in these weird scenarios, well, that was not charming or adorable. Please, sir, may I have some more? It wasn't that sort of, it was their lives. Their lives were awful and terrifying, and yeah. So that was the part that I don't love about it.
Yeah, I agree. All those foundling hospitals. Yep. Well, thank you, Julie. And then let's go to the next Julie Danes.
Well, I'm the reason that the announcement was made. My favorite Victorian story has been banned. But one thing that fascinates me about the Victorians was their obsession with death. I don't know what it was. I mean, I think the average lifespan for a child born in poverty was like 5. And for a tradesman, it was like maybe 25. Death was just everywhere. And at the same time, people were being buried alive. I think something like 2% of the people were actually buried alive. That's a lot. And so they had like the bells and these escape coffins. They were just obsessed with death. And at the same time, they're taking pictures of themselves or their dead people. They have all those death photographs, and they're adorning their clothes and their hats with dead animals. They even hunted some species to extinction in order to decorate their clothing with dead creatures. they just have this obsession with death. Telling ghost stories at Christmas Eve was a very Victorian tradition. Again, it just has this weird obsession with death. And I don't know, for some reason, maybe I'm also obsessed with that. So that really fascinates me about the Victorian era and those very weird Victorian people.
It was very interesting to be in England, especially in York. It seemed like every restaurant or pub or cafe, like they always had a little sign that said, this certain ghost lives here. So they're very, very caught up in that. Yeah.
Well, also on our trip, we learned that, this used to be a thing, an ancient monument, but then the Victorians tore it down so they could plant a forest. And this used to be a beautiful, a beautiful structure, but the Victorians tore it down so they could I feel like they destroyed half their own heritage.
Yeah. Even though their heritage is much, much older than ours in the US. But yeah, I agree. Okay, Rebecca, what do you got?
Honestly, one of my favorite parts of the Victorian era is a person. Her name is Ada Lovelace, and she is the only legitimate child of Lord and Lady Byron. Lord Byron. And she was a mathematician, which is not a thing. She was a mathematician. That's not a thing. Especially in the Victorian era. But she was hugely instrumental in furthering math and science as a woman. And yes, she was born into a little bit of privilege, but her home life was awful. Her father died when she was 8, but he was gone for most of her life before that. Her mother couldn't stand her, and so she lived with her grandmother, but her mother would send these letters to her grandmother with, all of this concern for her child, but there would be a note attached to the front of these letters saying not to show these to anyone. They were literally there in case it should ever come up in court that she needed to show her maternal instincts for her child. So it was just awful, but she went on to become this, she was a wife and a mother. She was a mathematician, and she is universally regarded as one of the first computer programmers. Not even one of the first female ones, but one of the first computer programmers, period, end stop. And I just find that incredible. And I have a father who has spent his entire career working in engineering. And one thing that he has said for years and years is that the world needs more women in technology, computer engineering, all of those things. And Ada Lovelace was one of the first ones ever, and we still need more women in the field. But I love that. I'm kind of obsessed with her.
Awesome.
That I really don't like about the Victorian era is actually something to do with Ireland. Ireland was really struggling during this period, especially the majority of Ireland that was Catholic. The Irish Catholics were lower than low and blamed for all of the problems Ireland ever had, because Protestantism was the reigning religion, despite the fact that the Catholics outnumbered them by like 3-1. And my last name's Connolly, in case you can't read the subtitle. I am Irish and Irish Catholic. And I'm not Catholic, but my heritage is. And that's exactly when my family started coming over. And just when you read about the treatment of the Irish Catholics in that period, it's ugly. It's really ugly.
Yeah, definitely.
The number of children that died in Irish Catholic families at that time is horrific.
That was like one of the requirements that Queen Victoria had of when Louise was looking for a husband is he has to be Protestant. That was like basically her number one requirement. So yeah. Okay, Jen, what do you have?
Okay, so just by way of information, there really was an HM Resolute ship, and they really did make a desk and put it in the Oval Office from Queen Victoria. I know, in case you all were wondering, that part of that movie is true. And there were about 4 presidents that used it, and Franklin Roosevelt was one of them that altered it so he could like wheel his chair under there. Anyway, just kind of a funny detail. I thought there's a couple cool things that happened in Victoria era. It was so long, like for example, a bad thing in the beginning, the kids had there were no labor laws yet, hardly.
Mhm.
So kids were working in factories for like 12 to 15 hours a day, and it was really awful, awful situation, and the mines and stuff. And that is something that I've researched a little bit and feel really sad about. So that happened, but by the end of the Victorian era, about 1880, there was a mandatory education law. So all kids under 10 there was like law finally that they would be educated. And I thought, okay, that's like a huge difference and a huge span. So there's like a big time period we're dealing with. But one thing I thought was cool is the penny post. I don't know, I didn't know this. I did a quick research before just for this very thing, Heather, and I discovered that, all through Regency you have to pay for the mail when you get it, kind of thing. And then in the Victorian era they started this thing called a penny post, where just for 1 penny anybody could send mail to anybody else. And I think that was a really cool thing to do for the poor in the country, basically, and just kind of, make it so that people could send letters to each other, which I think is awesome.
That's cute. I didn't know that. That's neat.
Well, I learned it just for you, Heather, so. And I could tell you more, but I feel like everyone said lots of great stuff. So anyway, that's kind of cool. I love and hate the whole era. I think it's great for many reasons, and disgusted by it for others. So.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, a lot of the kind of harder negative things about the Victorian era, that a lot did change throughout the decades. I think it was early 1900s that the Queen died. And then Louise died. Okay, so this is interesting. Spoiler alert, that when Louise died, she did die, and it was a while ago. So she lived through the first. So the other thing, Louise was a big proponent of helping with the soldiers, the wounded soldiers, and so no matter what side of the war, because her family was often divided by especially the Franco-Prussian wars, because she had Louise had 2 brother-in-laws that were Prussian, but they're sometimes on the opposite sides of the war still. And then Bertie, or King Edward's wife, he was a king to be, she was Danish, and England always had really close ties with France, with Napoleon. And so there's just a lot of convoluted stuff. But Florence Nightingale had there's a quote, and I don't remember what it was, that she basically said, a wounded soldier needs our help no matter where they're from. And so Louise really took on that identity. And so she was always doing, fundraising and collections for things like bandages to send out. And so she was actually living at Kensington when I can't remember exactly how she died. I mean, she was pretty old, but it was 1939. I remember that. And she died just as they were digging the trenches for World War II. Around Kensington Palace to protect it. Of course, they didn't know it was all going to be like a bomb dropping war. But so it's interesting that she lived, for, I think she was born 1848. That these people, Queen Victoria's family, they really did live for a long time, except for Prince Albert. But they saw so much change and so much innovation that it was kind of like you and I thinking, oh, what's the new thing? Like Snapchat, now TikTok, now, we're just constantly looking left and right and trying to figure out how to keep up in our world when our kids and grandkids are going 100 miles an hour around us. But anyway, so I just want to thank everybody for coming and having this discussion. I want to keep everyone all night long because, dinner is on the horizon. But I'm just really excited for this book release. And just as a reminder, I'll put up my little banner again. These are so fun to show. Okay, so comment on this video, and in the next couple of days, we'll choose winners to receive your own copy of In the Shadow of the Queen. But thank you so much, everybody, and I hope you have a good night. And maybe Julie will go and post her morbid story in the comments. See you later, everybody. Thank you.
Night.